okay? And laugh if they say something funny.
Thanks, Megan. Hello, everyone, and thank you. Welcome to this session. So let me quickly click on that. Yeah, so Thibaut Masson, I'm the main editor for Rental Scale Up. It's a vacation rental industry news website. We talk about what the OTAs are up to. We talk about market trends. What's new in tech? This is why we're here today. Maybe I will let each of you introduce yourselves. Francois, if you want to get started.
100%. Let's see if this works. Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Francois. I'm one of the co-founders of Enzo Connect. We are a guest experience platform for the hospitality industry, working with about 25,000 properties across 55 plus countries. So excited to talk about AI today, as it's a big part of our value proposition. And my background is actually in computational linguistics.
All right. Hey, everyone. This is Anurag from Price Labs, and I'm one of the co-founders and head data scientists at Price Labs. We do dynamic pricing and revenue management for about 280,000 properties worldwide. Again, excited to be here. Glad to be a part of this panel.
Hello everyone, Evan Dalgo here. Before I introduce myself, I think we need to raise the energy in the room and just give a round of applause to all of you who are committed to this industry, to our panelists. Let's go, raise the energy. I love it, I love it. I know it's cold in the other room and it's steamy in this room, but we'll make it work. So predictive hospitality is the art of predicting what your guests want before they have the thought. And our company, Adaptive, we do it in the form of conversion rate optimization. So how do we increase conversion rates on your email marketing, your website, using what we call AI personalization?
Thanks a lot. And yeah, I mean, these people are pretty smart, right? And I'm like, okay, AI, algorithms, computational what?
Yeah, I know.
Computational linguistics.
Linguistics, right? So the goal here is that when we walk out of the room, at some of these terms we're more familiar with. So for example, when we hear vendors talking about things like, okay, I know what you mean, or okay, I know what I should care about, but this is what we are here today. So what we're going to be talking about, for example, is what the big OTAs are doing. What is Airbnb doing? What is Booking.com doing? Why? Because as property managers, we usually, we see these platforms every day. So some things are at work that you see, right? So how can you maybe replicate some of these things you see and put that to work into your own business, right? That's our goal. So we can rival a bit, if you want, the OTAs, or learn a few things, or have conversations with vendors, or look smarter at tables when you're back after the EMA saying, let me tell you about AI. So the goal again is to use simple words in the sense that you're not that dumb. Well, I hope I'm not that dumb, but just more like have like actionable definitions of what this is about and how we can use that in our own businesses. Just show of hands, who has ever used ChatGPT, right? Who has ever talked to Amazon's Alexa? All right. What else do you have in mind? Who has ever transcribed a long, boring meeting and got transcription done through software like in a minute? Right. Okay, that's what we're going to be talking about. But all this really makes your life easier in your businesses, and that can be about operations, communications, pricing, can be as well like meetings. All these things are at work. They do exist. We're going to be talking about that. So first question maybe, and I said we wouldn't be using any complicated words, but let's talk about definitions, because from Alexa to ChatGPT to the Terminator, there's a lot of things AI can be or is not. So Francois, maybe you can get started with some definitions.
100%. So I like to sort of break it down into 3 different buckets. So bucket number 1 is narrow AI. Second bucket is going to be general AI, and third one is super AI. Okay? Narrow AI, and this is something that you guys have probably used. You don't necessarily know that it's AI, but it's performing a specific task for you. And I think pricing is probably a best example of that. It's trying to, actually I'm not even going to say what it's trying to do. You're going to explain that. But it's a very specific task, and it doesn't need to look like human cognition. It's just a lot of information that it's processing, and then it's making a decision. General AI is what you've discovered over the past 12 months, which is ChatGPT. It looks, it feels, it sounds like a human, but it still makes mistakes. And it's not fully a human yet, and there's something weird there and we have to discover. And then super AI is Terminator. Super AI, we all need to hide in bunkers, and it's the end of the world. So that's kind of the 3 definitions, and also 3 different ways of seeing AI. This has nothing to do with machine learning, but we'll explore that as well in today's panel.
Yeah, if I can add some more definitions. So when you hear AI and you say to someone, are you using AI? That's like asking someone, do you eat groceries? No, you don't. AI is a field of study. It's a very general idea of artificial intelligence and how do you continuously improve. But within AI, you have two other fields, which is machine learning and natural language processing. So natural language processing is what you'll find with ChatGPT. How do you take a bunch of words, make sense of it, put something in, spit something out. Machine learning is a bit broader, but it's the idea of taking all your data, connecting the dots to make sense of it, doing an analysis, and then streamlining an output. And based on that output, if it does something right, the engine will learn, it'll do it again. And if it does something wrong, it will never do it again. So just some more definitions.
Yeah, and I can add a little bit more. I really like Francois' classification into the three. Pricing is on the narrow AI side, where like there is a specific task. It would take a human being a lot of time to do it across every single location, every single property. But there are well-studied, well-designed algorithms that do that one thing really well. If you ask it to answer a question about where the nearest bar is, no, like it doesn't have data about it, it has no clue. General AI, like Francois said, ChatGPT kind of things, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily a superset, because even general AI can't answer what the forecast for next January is looking like, right? Because this one is a specific task. General AI, if you ask it about where the nearest bar is, it probably can. It will first ask you where are you located, and then tell you like, yeah, here's the nearest bar. The super AI, there's another term for it, artificial general intelligence, where it says AGI basically means you have reached human level, right? Like, but even then, not every human being can be a revenue manager. Not every human being can do a specific task that somebody who has trained for 10 years can do. So yes, the different part why Francois said we need to hide and run is it can learn very quickly. It won't take 10 years to become a doctor. It will take a lot shorter, right? Whenever it happens. We have no idea when it will happen. Don't ask me to predict that. But yeah, like those three is where I think those three are.
Just so you know, Anurag is not a real person. He's a super AI. So really good use case here.
So Anurag accepted, so if I got it right, we are right now in the world of narrow and general AI. So in the tools, we talk about some tools, Alexa, ChatGPT, and stuff we know with use, right? So it's not like, I'm talking about like future and it's going to be like in 5 years from now, right? It's also things we actually don't know is AI, and it is, right? I talked about earlier about OTA platforms like Booking.com, Vrbo, Airbnb, right? So they are using these kind of tools. So maybe, having these platforms in mind, each of you, can you talk maybe about how they're using AI and how I can, as a property manager, replicate part of what they're doing with the tools available on the market, and maybe Evan, if we get started.
Yeah, so the beauty about AI is you don't even realize you're using it. Any OTA you've been on, any big tech OTA, I should say, is using AI to personalize the experience to you. Raise your hand if you use Instagram or Amazon. Good, you're American. So the idea is on Instagram, the first time you use it, probably showed you junk, probably showed you things totally unrelated to you. But then you click on a few things, you follow a few accounts, and now our Instagrams and Amazons understands us more than we understand ourselves. So the idea is how do you take that feedback based on property recommendations? If you start clicking on certain properties and looking at certain photos with certain attributes, it's going to learn your purchasing power. It's going to learn your preferences, your affinities. It's going to build a profile on who you are. And the idea is that the more you engage with it, the more it learns so that the next set of properties is better. The search sort order is better. The idea is that it reduces friction, increases your enthusiasm, and gets you to the end zone much faster to convert into a booking. And the way they're using this is in the art of conversion rate optimization. This is the CRO that our industry should be talking about. So CRO is the idea of how do you benchmark what your existing website is doing, and then making changes and comparing it to that benchmark. Because every change you do make better improve, and the only way to do that is by benchmarking, understanding how is your existing site performing. So there are many tools on the market. Don't want to self-promote myself, but it's the idea of how do you take what the OTAs are doing and leveraging that for your direct bookings. But before I go any further, I want to say that conversion rate optimization does not need AI. You can make changes on your site like adding a featured property section, reducing the amount of clicks to create a thin transaction. There are many things you should do before even considering AI because it's free, and honestly, you need the fundamentals before you level up.
Yeah, so I come from the pricing world, and most of you at this point probably have heard of dynamic pricing. If you've booked a flight, that's where the whole field of revenue management started in some ways, scientifically. Like people had been setting prices and changing them for centuries, possibly before that, but scientifically using computers, revenue management started off with the airlines. One of the important things, at least when you think of OTAs, every OTA at some point or the other has had some price recommendation engine built in. So like probably Vrbo's market maker, Booking.com used to have one that they now shut down, I think. Airbnb has its own smart pricing, right? And this is a great example of behind every AI technology that you think of, there are human beings who are building this. And just because it's AI doesn't mean it's amazing and great, right? Like you probably all have experienced different pricing systems from the OTAs, and from what I hear at least, a lot of times the OTA pricing systems can be a little insufficient. So like this is an important one to remember. Like, just because it's AI doesn't mean it's great. Like you have to do your due diligence or use your human intelligence to say, does this actually make sense or not? So like, I think we'll address this question later, but this is a central message, at least I always talk about, even with our team. Like, just because a new technology is out there doesn't mean that we'll go run adopt it. We have to do our own evaluation of like, is this going to be actually helpful? Is this going to be actually valuable? When we talk about pricing as a part of narrow AI, like the biggest, anytime a system is making a decision for you, I think of that as AI. So like in our case, about as good as last summer, and based on that, we would set our prices. In a week's time, we would realize that, hey, based on the bookings that have happened so far and what we were expecting to happen, maybe the markets look softer, or maybe the markets look like they're rebounding. And based on that, a decision will be made on the pricing front that doesn't require you to come in, and then that's AI. Like it is making a decision for you. That doesn't mean, and again with Tesla Autopilot or any of the self-driving technologies, just because it's AI doesn't mean you like keep the hands off the wheel and start reading the newspaper. You still want to keep an eye on the road, which is true with every AI. Like I would say, till we reach the Terminator side of things, keep your eyes on the road.
I think I'll comment more on general AI than narrow AI. But I mean, if I were to, I think the comment that you just made is it's here to assist you. I think the goal of this panel in a way is also to demystify a bit of this. It's kind of a scary topic, but also an exciting one where everyone's throwing AI now because it, I guess, increases conversion for vendors more than anything. But it's really trying to understand what are you trying to solve for your business? What are you trying to solve in your guest experience, your booking experience, whatever it might be, or your pricing experience, and looking at ways to offload this using technology and not necessarily having to hire more people to do some of these tasks. So I'll comment more around general AI, I think.
But if I come back to the question I had, which was like, so these OTAs are doing this and that. So, and I said, on the market now, there are tools that enable you to do the same. And we talk about pricing, dynamic pricing tools. Okay, Airbnb does this. Who's using dynamic pricing, by the way, in their business? Okay, who's using on Airbnb for their listings on Airbnb? Who's using Airbnb smart pricing? Okay, just so you know, right? So as you can see, there's a lot of, let's say, hosts. Most of them here with managers and hosts, right? But are using smart pricing. Just mean that they don't know that it's AI maybe, right? Or they don't know that actually they can unplug this from the platforms and have some kind of technology from off the shelf in a way and use that. So in your field in communication, what kind of a solution or what are OTAs doing that field, and what can I use? So Evan, this would be the same question to you, right? I really want people to leave the room and say, okay, these are the tools. That's something I see in the platforms, and I can replicate that by this and that solution.
100%, sorry, I get that. So it's on the messaging side, this is where I can comment just because it's part of our solution is around this. I think we're going to start seeing OTAs adopt a lot of different AI to convert those inquiries faster for you, to start interacting in some ways with the guest for you. But I think this is some of the steps that you can actually start doing yourself. I'm sure all of you have used ChatGPT, as we saw from the raise of hands. And one of the things I always tell operators, a simple thing that you can do to sort of elevate your team's experience more than anything, is to create tabs within ChatGPT. This is free, by the way. You just go on OpenAI, you create an account, you can get 4.0 if you want to pay for it. And you create tabs for your properties. And then for each of those properties, you can copy-paste information from the OTAs, from your PMS, from your guest experience platform, whatever that might be, and start feeding in insights for your team. So I've seen operators do things like copy-paste all of their reviews, toss them in there, and then understand what are the top 3 things that they're not doing well. And you might always remember, you know, I really need to answer my guests better or something like that, but actually, statistically, it's because of the shower head that's not great, that you're getting bad reviews. They're always mentioning that shower head. This is insights that you might know, get a gut feeling, but it's not data-driven. And I think part of this panel as well is to start shifting you from being a gut feeling hospitality operator to more of a data-driven one. So using these tools to get insights that otherwise you wouldn't necessarily get because you're busy running the day-to-day operations.
The way I would describe how they said a human has to be present is you have to have a human in the loop. You can't let these things run autonomously. And the idea of all these AIs is that it's not a replacement, it's an enhancer, it's an optimizer. How do you take your team of 5 and make them optimize like a team of 20? So when it comes to the OTAs, I like to not reinvent the wheel. I like to look across the aisle at our sister industry, e-commerce. Because at the end of the day, direct bookings are important to you. Direct bookings are a form of e-commerce. Instead of the package arriving at your door, the guest arrives, but the process to purchasing is the same. So in e-commerce, a few years ago, Amazon was clobbering every direct-to-consumer business. Amazon was dominating, I think, like 80–90% of the market. But then a company named Shopify came around and democratized all these AI technologies for the individual companies. So what happened? Over COVID, Amazon lost its pendulum, it swung to the other side, and they ended up shuttering around 40–50 warehouses because demand has sunk. So the idea that OTAs are dominating now and we can change it is definitely true. They've done it in e-commerce. I don't see why we can do it here. Now, when it comes to AI personalization, which is our specialty, the reality is it's very pricey, and there's only one solution that I know of on the market. So if that's interesting and AI personalization is something you want to do, I would suggest starting with a rules-based system before even considering a solution like adaptive. A rules-based system means everyone coming to your website has a unique profile. They could be a family of 7 from Beverly Hills, they could be an elderly couple in Oklahoma. So the idea is that if you can create audience cohorts, and it's not as simple as I'm saying, but if you do your research, you can see how to do that. If you could pick up on the IP address and see an audience is in Beverly Hills, it will have maybe certain headlines. It'll show them certain properties based on purchasing power. So that's a good way to start, and then eventually level up using AI personalization.
And for these rules, what do I need to do that?
Yeah, it gets a little tricky because there aren't a lot of A/B testing environments in our industry. But you'd have to look for, I guess, an A/B testing company like Optimizely, and there's a few more that I could share. And what that does is it helps you split up your web visitors. So if you have 10,000 monthly web visitors, you can have 5,000 in bucket A, which is your existing website, and 5,000 in bucket B, where you're testing some of these recommendations or testing some of these audience cohorts. So I wish it was as simple as plugging it in and running with it today, but the reality is you have to educate, you have to learn what A/B testing entails, and then you can start implementing it on your website.
Yeah, and these kind of like testing we're talking about. It's like, you know, if you've ever been to a Booking.com presentation, they will tell you that they do like thousands of such A/B tests every week on their websites, right? So it's a way for you don't have to go all the way like this, but like that's a way to do it.
Start with one. Start with one. I know Booking.com, it's popular in Europe. In America, it's probably easier to mail a check to them versus book on their platform. But Booking.com is extraordinarily advanced. They actually run 1 million A/B tests a month. And it's the idea that as you improve the 1% on your website, they don't just add in value, they compound in value. And then once it's running on autopilot, on to the next. And that's the art of conversion rate optimization.
François, not that I want you to plug your company for something that you mentioned, but can you explain again, in the case of communication, right?
Yeah.
And I talk about off the like, I don't know, I just talk about what these OTAs will be doing with the communication. But what do you guys provide? How do you lift? Using the example of the company, but just I want to be very concretely, how do you lift? How do you use these technologies to help with communication, talking with guests, for example?
100%. So, I mean, I'll take a step back into answering this and think of the Gartner hype cycle. So the Gartner hype cycle is this curve that goes up, down, and back up. And you learn about ChatGPT, you're excited, you're at the top of the curve. You're like, wow, this is gonna solve all of my problems. Then you start using it a bit more and you're like, wait a minute, this isn't working. It just answered a guess in a completely different language. This is not gonna work for me. And so kind of the goal of what we've been doing at Enzo, but in general, and I think a lot of different companies in this space, is to slowly bring you back to that level of trust where you know exactly where it's going to be useful and where it's not going to be useful. And so in our case, what we look at a lot is where is the content about your property, about your rules? Why is it that when I check into a hotel, I don't ask any questions? I just show up and that's it. So how do we provide that same level of experience at scale for vacation rentals? And that means having all of this information about your property, your rules, your how to get in, your absolutely everything sitting somewhere in a knowledge base, and I think we're going to touch on how to structure that information, and then being able to automatically draft responses based on all of this content. So one of the big things that we see is VAs get trained for a week or two with maybe a document on Notion. Here's how you're supposed to answer. Here's all the information about the property. Thank you, goodbye. And then a few days later, you get a question from that VA saying, hey, are we allowed to use those tiki torches? The guest is asking. It's somewhere dug deep in that information, in those PDFs, in those Google Docs that you've given them. And it's just very difficult when you have all this information, all these properties to figure out this content. So again, going back to general AI, it can look at all of this content very quickly, figure out what the ideal responses would be based on your rules, your sort of structure, and then accordingly draft a response either for your team or for your guests automatically. So I think these are the kinds of specific tasks, whether it's using general AI, whether it's using narrow AI, where you can start moving your business to the new age, where you're no longer having to do everything by hand. The one issue behind all that is it does mean that you need to be a part of this revolution. You need to be a part of taking those first steps in building that knowledge base, in structuring your information to scale using AI. So hope that helps.
Something Francois said that I want to double click on, it's just because AI is potentially answering questions from your guests on your behalf, that doesn't mean that you get rid of your team. The hope and the point of all of this is to make it so that they are not doing the low value menial tasks as much. Every human being has to do menial tasks. Like I wash dishes, I do all kinds of things. Everybody in this room is probably doing something they're like, oh, somebody else is probably better qualified for this. That's totally okay. But if you're spending 80% of your time punching in numbers or finding out in that hidden PDF where that PDF is and finding that information, that's probably better done by AI. And then when the guest is not satisfied with the answer, the human being comes in and says, okay, like clearly it's not getting everything right. Where can I add value that will help this case? I will also say this on the booking.com example. If you've been on a lot of e-commerce websites or even booking.com, Thibaut, sorry, you used to work for booking.com.
Sorry, Thibaut.
Okay.
I own it.
Okay. It looks almost over-optimized. Like if you compare some of the other, if you compare Airbnb to booking.com, Airbnb looks fairly clean, booking.com looks very, very cluttered. Vrbo sits somewhere in between, right? So like it's not just about like you don't have to blindly keep saying, hey, when I add this button here, more people are clicking. When I add this button there, more people are clicking. It doesn't mean you keep adding buttons everywhere. You also have to put your thinking cap on and say like, okay, I don't want to have this devolve into a monster that I can't recognize anymore, right?
By the way, none of this is supposed to be easy. I see a lot of eyes in the audience like, what do I do next? The reality is education is what you do today. So for all of these things, for anyone landing on your website, You're lucky because you all have Google Analytics, and Google Analytics tells you who's shopping in your store, what are they looking at, where are they getting stuck. So an actionable item right away is go look at Google Analytics Academy for Google GA4. If you look up Google Analytics Academy, GA4, it will run you through how to use GA4, how to look at Google Analytics, because that's your answer. That shows you how your website's performing and how people are engaging, and without that, you can improve. So Google Analytics Academy is something you can do today, and it's free.
Yeah, we'll break the format a bit. What I can do, I'm ask something I'm doing as well, and maybe take one or two questions right now. Is there anything unclear so far before we move on to the next bit? So that's, again, we make sure that we don't have trouble together on this path. But for example, we talk about who's using any kind of like AI tool, like ChatGPT, for example, to create that different versions of their listing descriptions. Quite a few of you. Does anybody wants to share how they're doing this by chance? Right. Thanks.
Coming to you.
Right. Okay, the point is actually see that some of us are using this. I'm curious to see how.
Yeah, so I'm a former copywriter. Just generally, I wrote for a newspaper for several years. So I thought that it was very interesting as AI came onto the scene that copywriters had a panic attack and thought, our jobs are gone. And I find as a former copywriter that AI is really helpful for me because there are times my brain is just not functioning the way that it needs to be, because copywriting is a creative art. And if you don't have enough rest, if you are using the other side of your brain for the vast majority of that day and you're having to immediately switch over to the other side of your brain, it just doesn't function the way that it's supposed to. And so AI is there as a tool for me to go through. I never copy and paste exactly what ChatGPT gives me. Never. I always tweak it. But that's something that we have found really, really helpful in our business, and it helps with my executive assistant as well because she takes care of our social media, and she really doesn't enjoy it. She's Gen Z, and she is not a big social media person, so she's an odd one. But I will say that it's super helpful for her, just creating some, like, the review post, for instance, you know, just kind of coming up with the copy that needs to go down below the post on Instagram. She doesn't want to have to think that through, and this is not her final industry. So she's just like, I don't know what to do, Mom. I'll just ask ChatGPT, and it works.
It's such a great example. Again, in my case, let's imagine Vrbo is more for groups and families, right? Let's say you have like one listing where you can tell ChatGPT, like, can you take my description, rewrite it, and with a target, a family of 4, for example, right? Parents, 2 kids. And it can reject basically your existing description and adapt it to a Vrbo-friendly. You're going to get a Vrbo-friendly description, basically that can plug into Vrbo, which is more geared towards family, right? You see where I'm going? When you have like a building with 25 apartments, they are really the same. You really need some help, just like reject a big description, give me 3 more versions. What I do as well, because I'm lazy, so I also have properties in the Caribbean and a website for that. On the blog, what I do as well, I lift some good reviews about the villas, and I say, well, that specific villa, for example, and I tell ChatGPT, here's my description, I usually have. Now lift from these 3 different comments I'm giving you, lift the best quotes or what people really like, and inject this into the description. Suddenly I got a description that's really like vivid, with people like saying, oh, I really love the view, or things people really like. Again, it's something like 4-bedroom and there's a king-size bed and blah blah blah. It's like what people really liked as well. It's using their words, not mine. So again, sometimes you get some really amazing description that really resonates with the target. But again, you have to put free the output as well. That's helping social media. Your team, for example. And, yeah, good question.
I'm curious on the from a pricing standpoint. We have a bunch of different markets. So one thing we've played with is just dropping in there, what weekends should I search price on? Maybe even more so than what the algorithms would normally be doing, but to pick up conferences, football games, whatever else it might be, if we're trying to manage that across 30 or 40 markets instead of being intimately aware of 1 or 2 markets. So I'm curious if you've seen that to pick up events, maybe even before they start fully getting triggered in the algorithms.
Yeah, so that's actually a great example. I will give another sort of weird example on this side of things. But for pricing, for example, like it is a part of the narrow AI spectrum, right? So like the default, the way our algorithms work is we look at what kind of booking patterns exist in a particular location. are there any outliers? And then that's what you're kind of talking about, right? So like, if March is usually low demand, but there is one weekend in March where we are seeing like, the market is beginning to book up faster than usual. Like this far out, nobody books, but this year for coming March 19th, already 6% bookings have happened. You're like, okay, something must be off. Our algorithms would pick it up, right? The place where it falls short, and this depends, this is the data dependency in some ways, is before, I think your question is, before any of the bookings happen, how can we get ahead of it? Now, there are strategies that you can do on the revenue management side that are completely independent. They basically say, if nobody is booking this far out, let's keep the prices a little elevated, not become the first one to be booked. But even then, like, if your properties really stand out, somebody, even with the elevated price, might say, hey, I'm coming for this big concert that's coming up. I'll book your place, and even though it's more expensive, I'll book it. And you don't want that to happen for you to be the first property to get booked when a big event is happening. Now, one thing is, of course, we have a team, you have a team where you look at, okay, what are potential events in this area? We actually subscribe to a list of events, but one of the things we find is it comes with so many false positives. If we look at, and we have done these tests where like you get an event list for a particular market, and every weekend there is something going on. And does this mean for every weekend we pump up the prices? No, like that's not too wide. So this is where the human part, I feel, comes in a little bit. The craziest example I've heard on this side is in Madrid. We have a customer in Madrid. Back in 2019, they told us, hey, look, UEFA Champions League final is coming up at the end of the month, and we know that it should drive a lot of demand, but it hasn't yet because we don't know who the two finalists are going to be. And one of the semi-finals is between Real Madrid and Liverpool, and if Real Madrid wins, it won't have any impact. Like the Spanish folks are local, they are not going to stay overnight. If the British team wins, they go bonkers. Like they will pay 5x the rate, and they will party all weekend. It won't matter who won and who lost. In that case, like he's like, can you track the game and adjust prices accordingly? And I'm like, well, that would be something. But this is where the human touch comes in. Like as the game is progressing, one of the things we did is we said, let's put a hedge in. Like let's put the price up already, so that if the British team wins, the prices are high. If the British team doesn't win, then I guess we lower them back, right? Like this is the kind of thing you do. But these things do require some manual intervention. Like AI is not there yet.
If I could just add one fun thing for ChatGPT. By the way, super cool use case. I never even thought of that. Fortunately, we play soccer in America and it's not so popular. But in ChatGPT, sometimes you'll see that the responses are very stale. And you'll say it 10 different ways, and all 10 responses are very stale. So ChatGPT is very controlled. And if you were to plug in the same everything that you wanted out of it, the same exact way you were to do it, but then you put temperature 0. What that is, so temperature 0 to 1 is how creative you're allowing ChatGPT to be. So I believe that if you put in temperature 0, it'll go crazy. It'll give you some insane response with such creativity. And if you put temperature 1, which most of the replies are usually closer to that, it'll be very, very specific. So you can do temperature 0.3, temperature 0.4, play around with that and see if the creativity and the responses are helpful.
Let's quickly, I'll go back to the quick Q&A again, going through things, but perfect, thanks. Let's start some of the names of tools that exist in the market that as property manager may want to use, and they can be related to the actual business, operational business, communication, pricing, or to running a business, right? I talked earlier about transcriptions, how we use software for we have the meetings, imagine you have an owner meeting with online, so you can't meet the person. It's nice to send out a transcription of like, hey, that's what we talked about, and the actions we agreed on. That's an example where you can very simply, get the owner saying, oh, you know what, they took notes, and just like send me an email straight away with the notes from the conversation, and they're listening to me, right? It's also good for you, right? These kind of tools that can really basically, like Zoom does it, all these tools do transcription, right? So thinking about this kind of tools, so either directly like, I will talk one of the one in our industry, there's a company called Paraspot. Anybody heard of Paraspot? So it's an Israeli company I interviewed earlier this year, and they do remote property inspections through AI. So basically, you have a camera, and once you go with your, basically, you take photos of the property first, or even a video if you want. And every time a guest checks out, he has to take just a few photos. That's it before the checkout. Or the cleaner can do this, and it's going to check whether how far off it is from the ideal state of the place or not. So it enables them basically to do remote inspections, track how things are going, can even sometimes checks how well the cleaner is doing that job, like just asking them to do take a few photos. So there's just an example where basically, it saves time on inspections. I think somebody, could be a cleaner, could be a guest, I don't know how many guests actually do it, but because I was complaining about the chores that things have to do at the end of the stay, but just an idea of how you can suddenly have these kind of tools enabling you to have better service or operations. So
Yeah, I could name so many. I mean, the way I think of these tools, and I think the way you should think of these tools when you're solving a problem is really looking at what is the problem that I'm trying to solve, and not look for AI for it, just look for a solution. If it so happens to have AI, then great. That's how they decided to solve it. I look at companies like AutoHost around guest verification, where they can match IDs and see if the reservation matches, and look at different types of data points to flag certain reservations. But I also look internally within my own team, how I can make my team more efficient. So one example I give on a panel in Australia a few weeks ago at Astra was this system that literally, well, I want to say cut my sales team in half, but pretty much in terms of what they could do, called Glyphic. And it's one of those call transcription services. So, just you record a call, you have a conversation with a prospect, and then it takes notes. But it doesn't only take notes, it also fills in my CRM and writes a follow-up email, which is basically the entire admin work that salespeople never want to do. They just want to get on calls and sell and have a good conversation, but they never actually want to fill in the CRM for you to, get reports and know if they were selling or not. So again, I'm not replacing my sales team in a way where there's no more salespeople. I'm just allowing them to do what they do best, allowing them to be more efficient, and not spend 60% of their time filling in a CRM with basic information that you can find somewhere else. So I kind of urge you to think the same way when you're dealing with your guests, when you're dealing with your owners, when you're dealing with different stakeholders. How can you make the people involved more efficient? And to what you were saying, not necessarily removing the human, but enhancing them. And I think there's a quote, which I'm going to say, which is entirely Evan's quote, but I keep using it over and over and over again. What is it? People who use AI will replace those who don't. No, I'll perform, my bad. So always quoting, that one.
I'll double down on what Francois said. It doesn't matter whether the website is something.ai. It does not matter whether their landing page has AI in it. Go talk to the vendors, see if it solves a business problem for you. It could be a simple rule-based system, which could have been built 20 years back, but nobody did it. If they're doing it now and not using AI, but they are solving an actual problem for you, that's what you need.
what's a rules-based system again?
So,
that.
yeah, a rule-based system is essentially, you can almost say, if this happens, you can create a tree, essentially. And if you make the tree large enough, then that's AI. Decision trees are in some ways. And a tree that learns from data is AI. But you can create a tree, for example, to say, okay, if the guest comes in and asks for this is what I'm going to answer. If the next time, if they ask, the follow-up question says, sorry, I didn't get that, I'm going to trigger that my service agents, customer service agents get called because my system is not able to answer, right? But if the person accepts the answer, ask them for some follow-up questions. So you can do a lot of if-else things that are very, very helpful. They don't need to be AI. In fact, the first, in my undergrad AI class 20 years back, 20 years back, the first chess playing system that was introduced was actually an if-else kind of a
IBM's computer?
Not IBM's computer, but and I came out of that class very disappointed because I'm I was hoping for something a lot more advanced. This looks like, I could have done this as a kid, but that's the point. I could do it as a kid, but not at the speed that a computer can. So a lot of software, even if it's not using AI, it can do things for you that you could do it, just it would take you 2 days to do it. This would do it in 5 minutes, right? So like, don't fall for advertising, just go figure out, is this solving your problem or not?
Yeah, two tools I love are Enzo Connect and Price Labs. I genuinely do. They really help take your team to the next level. They really optimize your team. But before I even like talking about AI tools, I like talking about things you already have, like Google Analytics. That is a tool that everyone should be proficient in because you have marketers, you have SEO guys, you have PPC guys coming in, and they just take credit for everything. But the reality is there's so much going on. And Google Analytics, especially with e-commerce tracking, which everyone who has a direct booking site should have, and if you don't, come talk to me and I'll connect you with someone who can do it. E-commerce tracking shows you every single flow. So you can essentially see what did the PPC guys have an impact on? What did the advertising guys have an impact on? So that's a really good one you already have. And another one which I like, which is very affordable and it's really consumable, is something called Hotjar, Hotjar. And what that shows is it's like heat maps on your website. It shows a lot of people are hanging out over here and clicking over here. It shows no one's over here. If you see that no one's clicking over there, get rid of that, replace it with something more intriguing. So that's like, I think, the fastest way to see. It's also very consumable. What parts of your website are intriguing, what's performing, what's not. Whatever is not is a low-hanging fruit for you to optimize. So Hotjar and Google Analytics, two things you can start using ASAP.
So we've just seen that you're a friend, right?
I was going to say, we use something on our website, we use something like Hotjar, not exactly that, but it also tells you like, where are people rage clicking? Like, you know, like they expect something to happen, and they're clicking on it, but nothing is happening. And you realize that, oh, something's wrong in our UI because people think something should happen and nothing is going to happen. Right?
What's the name of the tool?
We use something called mixed panel or that, yeah.
Yeah, we use Hotjar as well. It's really helpful even to look at how to convert, your people faster. And this is what you always talk about, Evan, right? And what you mentioned about there not being any clicks on certain places, like if you need more reservations and people aren't clicking ever on your properties and are always going to some side information about the location, you're never going to get those direct reservations. So just kind of seeing how they interact with your website using those tools, plus they're free. A quick question for the audience, raise your hand. Does anyone have these kinds of systems as part of a process in your day-to-day operations? Yeah, so this is what I think needs to change in a way in this industry if you want to grow direct bookings. It's not just the color of your logo. This is what these OTAs are doing, and this is how you become an OTA to a certain extent.
That's the motto of our industry. If we don't meet or exceed a guest expectation, they're going to be dissatisfied. And their expectation has been set by the big tech OTAs. They go on their website, they're spoon-fed everything, they convert fast, they feel like it's trustworthy. The idea of having the OTAs as a billboard is a great strategy, but your website has to meet the standard, either meet or exceed their expectations. Otherwise, they're going back to the OTA. They'll even pay a premium on the OTA because they trust it more. So the idea of showing you tools that aren't AI, the reason is because this is the foundation. These are the fundamentals that you have to have in place to one day level up with AI.
So that's where I'm going. Now I feel bad because I focus so much on the colors of our website and photos and the rest. So I feel like it's being used. But quite seriously, that's my last question before we bring back the floor to questions. But so how do I get ready? Because I say, okay, I need to do this and do that, but do I need to get the skills? What kind of skills do I need? Do I need to hire very expensive people to do this? Because, how do I get ready for this in terms of like the data, the skills? How do I do this?
I would start with the data, the information. When I speak to property managers and I ask how have you structured your business from a data perspective? There is so much value in the data that each and every one of you have, and I think it's so underplayed. I was having a quick conversation last evening about valuing that data and being able to actually put a price to it. But if you could show that you have 100,000 guests, all these emails, all this data about them, why they travel, when they travel, and you could show that they're actually really tied to your brand and your hospitality, and you can get 10% of these guests to come back every single year, there is a certain intrinsic value in that. And I think people just don't look at it. They just look at number of properties and how big are they and what is it going to generate, and that's it. And it's like, well, what about all these guests that you've been collecting over the years? So I think one of the exercises to move to that digital age, if you will, is to start thinking about your hospitality business from a data perspective. How are you structuring the content for your team, for your guests, and of course for future reports to understand who you're catering to? There's so many different ways of doing this. I had a chance to meet with different property managers that have used ClickUp, Hightable, Notion, basically glorified spreadsheets, which are ways of storing information to model all of this out. So I have property X, and I have information ABC around property X, and I have these guests that are all the avatars associated with property X that has information ABC. Maybe that's one way of structuring it.
Also, do I train my team? Do I hire somebody on Upwork who's like a ClickUp expert to set up everything? How do I do this?
That is a great question. I think it depends on your, will to learn this and your will to change this. I would recommend doing it yourself using some of the simple tools, because at the end of the day, this is your business. This is how you're going to structure things moving forward. And then to actually use ClickUp, yeah, I'd probably get someone because it's kind of annoying to set up. But that's up to you.
But like plenty of ask in your team. There are going to be people who are very tech savvy, even if you are not, who are going to be very helpful in setting this up. Like this shouldn't be. On the pricing or revenue management side, like one of the things that I recommend to everybody, because people do switch PMSs, when you do, make sure your past booking data gets moved to the new PMS. That information is so useful to be able to say, how are you comparing? Like, you don't need to use us, you don't need to use pricing systems. If you have your own data, it automatically tells you so much about how things are trending. You're able to say, okay, it looks like booking windows have been shortening each year. So it's okay that I have not booked anything for June so far, because even last year I had not booked anything. And if with shortening booking windows, I should not be expecting anything more than this. Or it will help guide you like when to panic and when not to panic in some ways, right? Sometimes people are like panicking that hey, January is here and nobody has booked yet, but 80% of your bookings happen for summer. And I'm saying an example, like there are some markets where people book far out, there are markets where people book close in. But if you have your data from many years, all of this becomes a lot easier to track. So move your data with you, whichever system you go to.
Yeah, and to add to that, there are two definitions which I don't think you need today, but going into the next 2-3 years, you should definitely familiarize yourself with. Those are data lakes and data warehousing. So right now, think about all the systems you have in place, your PMS, your CRM, you have reviews, you have your automation logs, you have your operations, you have probably 8 or 9 different systems in your tech stack, which are all cultivating data, which is great. So whether you like it or not, you've got some gold in there. But the reality is none of those systems are talking to each other. Right now that data is siloed in each of the unique systems. So a data lake is probably something you don't need, but that's all the data, you just throw it into the data lake. It's a mess, but at least it's in one place. A data warehouse is a structured form of that, where you have a specific way of tracking your data, and all of that data that's fed to the data warehouse is compiled in the format, in a structured format that you can use later on. Again, this is not something you need today, but it's something you're going to start seeing, so familiarize yourself with those terms.
And I'm just going to add real quick, I know data sounds kind of technical and but we're talking about basic things here. We're talking about like your check-in instructions. Like, where do you have your check-in instructions? Is it just in your PMS? Is it on a document somewhere, just kind of in Google Drive, or in a text message because the owner told you about how to get in through the back door, etc.? No, it's structuring that information, having name of property, check-in instruction, and I'm sure a lot of you are already thinking that way, but once you start really thinking about every single piece of data in your business that way, you're going to increase the value, like the financial value of what this is worth enormously, and just make it easier for you to make shifts from one PMS to another without breaking anything, or picking new technologies that are going to keep appearing. I mean, this industry is going to keep innovating for the next foreseeable future. That vendor hall is just going to keep getting bigger and bigger. So, yeah.
So let's open the floor again for questions. If you're doing that.
Hi, I think that's very interesting when you talk about data and data warehouses and how to store that. But one thing that I think that you're not mentioning, and I think it's important for us to know, it's who's going to when we talk about data mining, like, well, we have all that data, but how are we gonna put it on that warehouse? Who's gonna do the dashboard? Is there any companies out there that can help you, or do you do it for us?
It's a great question. The reality is there's so many companies out there because they're using it for corporations, they're using it for e-commerce, they're using it for big business. I think the most well-known one is probably Snowflake, but it's super expensive and you probably don't need it. And it's also not tailored to the VRM industry. So that's the problem why I said it's not something today, but I know that there are people working on it specific to VRM data points. So I guess to start, just familiarize yourself with which data you already have, and then you can probably even build your own data warehouse using maybe even Excel spreadsheets, or it'll get you so far. You're gonna cap out at some point. But the reality is our industry does not have any data warehouse specific, but if you look over to the hospitality industry as a whole, you might find data warehousing for, I guess, OTAs, for other travel-based e-commerce industries. So I don't have any great ones to recommend today, but at the very least, it sounds like you know what's in your data, and that's a great start.
Anybody has sold that? Anybody hired somebody, a company, or just, yeah, can you share how you sold it?
We're on the KPI automation, so we can do that for any vacation rental data. So if somebody wants to build a warehouse or data lake or whatever. Hi, so my name's Serena, so we run KPI automations. And so if people are interested, we can grab their data from their PMS, push it to their accounting system, or build any kind of warehouse, do guest registration forms, bring all of that data together, and then bring analytics out that they can see.
Good to know.
I found your sample.
Yeah.
There are also a lot of, like on the dashboarding side, there are a lot of free tools available. Like some of the popular enterprise solutions are Tableau and Spotfire, but you don't have to go there. There are free tools, like Microsoft has something called Power BI, which a lot of people, a lot of revenue managers use that, but it's super simple. Like you don't need a training to start using it. It's pretty straightforward.
And again, Upwork, for example, anybody has used Upwork before? I mean, good and bad experiences, I know, but sometimes you go to Upwork to find a freelancer who does this every day. They can really set up stuff easier than we can do probably, and just like we should filter out like people who have like real experience, very successful. That's a way to sometimes find people who are really expert on some tools you may need at some point, but not always the company, right? So it's also a choice. Any question?
Yeah, actually to piggyback on top of a comment earlier about finding someone on your staff that's technically savvy, you can actually just use GPT to create some software, just like a Python script that'll actually call your APIs for your PMS system and extract that data for you and load it into a database. It's actually really easy. So if we're actually talking about using AI, that's a great use case that you can put together in a weekend.
Love that. Thank you.
You might need to translate that a step further.
Yes.
Yeah, so like all of your PMS systems, like not all, most of them have an API where you can basically just call them directly through your software and then extract data, whether it's guest names, property, they have a whole field. Like if you talk to your PMS provider, they'll give you API endpoints. And so you basically just create a quick little script that you can set up to automatically run once a day, once a week, whatever it is, to call that API, pull your data into the database that GPT will help you create, and then you can kind of start creating your own data lake and your own data warehouse without having to go through Upwork or all of these other sources, where you're not having to hand out passwords to your systems to random third parties or anything like this. So it's an option.
Thanks for sharing.
So we do data chats with our owners also, and I just wanted to mention Price Labs. You have great data that we show our owners, and we go over the historic data sheets that are really powerful, especially when they're nervous and they're not getting as many bookings. I just wanted to go back to your comment because we do screen manually through all their reviews, and we show them what is strong about their property and then maybe one wish that we have. And you had mentioned plugging it in somewhere. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, 100%. I think, so the example I gave was copy pasting, so there's no fancy tool to do it. It's literally just Command C, Command V, but copy pasting all those reviews that you have for every single one of your properties to surface insight at scale. So you might do it, I don't know how many properties you manage, but I would assume that you know, once you get to a certain scale, if you're at 800, 1,000, it becomes very difficult to go for every single owner, show them all the reviews, although I'm sure they look at those reviews themselves. So it's just the idea of being able to grab all of that feedback across your entire business and then getting quick insights, more as an example, from all of your properties, all of those reviews. Because maybe you can see some patterns in the way your staff communicates with guests. Maybe it's around the check-in experience or certain amenities that you provide that you might see in passing when you read that review and you're focusing on, you know, they didn't have a great check-in experience, so that's why. But there was another comment in passing, and that comment in passing seems to be in different places. And by just doing that, you can kind of get those insights at scale. I mean, there's dozens of examples like this. One of my favorite ones that we do in our company is sentiment analysis. Proactively being able to know the sentiment of a conversation and a guest before they leave that review. You know, so if I know that a guest is unhappy because they've been sending me all these messages like, I don't know this information and this is really complicated, and use certain keywords, you as a human, you already kind of know that this isn't going very well. And if you can do that at scale and train your team at scale to get that kind of information and then be more proactive on unsatisfied guests about to check in, you will increase your review score right away.
A strategy to add on top of that is, in general, I think it's around 15 to 20% of guests will leave a review without being solicited. If you follow up and use a sentiment analysis tool like that, so you already are going into the conversation understanding how they feel. If you follow up, that number goes up to about 80% will leave a review.
Can you guys name a tool like this?
There's reviews, REVYOOS. They pretty much consolidate all your reviews and put it on your website in a consumable way. There's a few others out there, but it's the idea of having insight, how your guests feel, and then following up and then making sure they leave a good review. So using his tool that he's talking about, plus having that insight is huge.
One more further question.
Somebody.
For the sentiment analysis, sorry, you don't have to copy paste one review at a time.
Yeah.
You go to the reviews page, copy the entire page,
Yeah.
paste it in.
Ask for specific sentiment also. What is the sentiment on the stay? What is the sentiment on the communication?
And this is data Airbnb is collecting. They ask for all these different segments so they can really understand your business. So now it's on you to do the same thing with your business.
Thank you. I've learned so much. So my name is Sophia from Singer Island, Florida, just 2.5 hours south. But we are new, by we I mean me, and we've taken our properties, our family properties, and turned them into vacation rentals. But the team is myself and a cleaning crew. So if I'm looking at 19 listings that I've put on, where should my money go towards? What program? I'm on Airbnb, I'm on Vrbo, I'm looking at bookings.com, but it's overwhelming. So where do I spend my money first?
From what I hear, if you're in the US, don't need to go on booking.com just yet. I think the first step should be to get a property management system. I think that's sort of the backbone of the entire operation. So that would be forget AI.
Yeah.
Get a property management system first. Yeah.
So do one of you guys have?
None of us are.
None of
Yeah,
us.
Okay, so which system do I get? You know, I mean, there's so many.
I'll say
We're partnered with all of them.
Anyone in the room, please come talk to me.
What they're trying to say is their tools are very effective, but a communication tool is huge, especially if you have an AI in it. So a unified inbox, I think, is extraordinarily important. So if you're on 20 different channels, from WhatsApp to Airbnb, and if you can unify all those channels into one inbox, that's huge. And then when you sprinkle AI in, what that does is it learns the most common questions. It will fill in 70 to 80% of the response, and the last 20% is the human touch to make it personalized. And what that does, it takes your one reservationist, one communication, and it pretty much increases their velocity of response time and the amount that they're sending back. So I think a unified inbox is really good.
You just gave my pitch better than I did. I love it.
I'm looking at Megan, we have to close here, I'm sorry for that, but these are the email addresses of this. You can see they're smart, approachable, so I guess you guys have booths as well, so don't hesitate. That's what BMA is also about, is like get to know each other in the booth, or have a drink together. I forgot the slides, I'm guilty of that, but please do review this session. It's very important.
Please review the session. And huge thank you to our panelists and our moderators.